Whenever an election happens in India, one fact is almost certain to be repeated by newscasters all around the world: that India is the biggest democracy in the world. With more than 4 times the population of the United States, the 2019 general election saw more than 900 million people cast a ballot. But when the last ballot is counted, the results announced, and those elected begin their actual work, how exactly does the government of this gargantuan country work? To understand how the Indian government is structured, first we ought to define what kind of government India has. The Indian government states that the Republic of India is a, quote, sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic with a parliamentary form of government, which is federal in structure with unitary features. To quickly define all those words for those who don't speak this dialect of the I never go outside language, well, sovereign, socialist, and secular are pretty self-explanatory. Well, maybe not socialist, but that's really not the point of this video. Meanwhile, a democratic republic is a democracy without a monarchy where citizens elect representatives to govern on their behalf. The parliamentary system means that the executive branch draws its legitimacy from the legislative branch, which here is also called the parliament. And finally, a federal government is one that is made up of a union of smaller territories, while a unitary government is one where the national government is the supreme authority. So basically, India acts as a union of its 28 states, but where New Delhi still calls a lot of the shots. Hence why the national government is more formally called the union government. The Indian government is divided into 3 branches: an executive, a legislative, and a judicial branch. The legislative branch is the Parliament of India, which is split into 2 smaller houses: the Lok Sabha, or House of the People, and the Rajya Sabha, or the Council of States, which means that the Indian legislature is bicameral. The Lok Sabha is the lower house, like the US's House of Representatives or the UK's House of Commons, with MPs elected from up to 550 constituencies for 5-year terms, but can be dissolved by the president before that 5 years is up. The Rajya Sabha, meanwhile, is the upper house, more like the Senate or the House of Lords, with 238 members elected by the state legislatures and 12 more appointed by the president for their contributions to society. Their re-election cycles are also the same as US senators, with members serving 6-year terms, and a third of them going up for re-election every even-numbered year. The legislature is mainly in charge of passing legislation, voting on major issues, and overseeing the executive branch. The Prime Minister, in fact, is elected from the members of the Lok Sabha, as whichever party, or often coalition of parties, has the majority in the House gets to elect a leader to be the next Prime Minister, which also means the Prime Minister can be voted out by Parliament. At the top of the executive branch, India is led by a head of state and a head of government. The head of state is the President of India, currently Draupadi Murmu, while the head of government is the aforementioned Prime Minister, currently Narendra Modi. While the Prime Minister is elected from among the members of the Lok Sabha, the President is elected by Parliament as a whole as well as the state legislatures. More on them in a bit. If Modi's the only one of these 2 you've actually heard of though, that's because the President is actually a largely ceremonial office, which, while having some important powers and responsibilities, generally acts according to advice from the Prime Minister and other top ministers. The Prime Minister also appoints the Union Council of Ministers, essentially the Indian government's cabinet, with the heads of all the different government ministries, including the Ministers of Defense, Home Affairs, Cooperation, Railways, Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, External Affairs, Tribal Affairs, Civil Aviation, Steel, Jal Shakti, Housing and Urban Affairs, and a whole bunch of other ministries. The members of the council fall into 5 categories: the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, basically the backup Prime Minister, the Cabinet Ministers who I just mentioned, Ministers of State, parentheses, independent charge, who are junior ministers that don't report to a Cabinet Minister, and Ministers of State, no parentheses, who are deputy ministers that do report to a cabinet minister. The third branch is the judicial branch, the referees of government, from the Supreme Court of India at the very top, then the 25 high courts, some of which have jurisdiction over multiple states and territories, to the myriad of district courts spread throughout the country. The Supreme Court is headed by a single Chief Justice, as well as 30 Associate Justices, and their job is to review laws passed by Parliament and call out any laws that violate the Constitution. India is divided into 28 states and 8 union territories, and India is very clear about keeping a balance between the union government and the state governments. The state governments for the most part resemble the federal government, though with some differences. States are led by chief ministers, who are essentially like the prime minister but on the state level, and by governors, who are appointed by the president for 5-year terms, and can even be appointed to lead multiple states, like ESL Narasimhan. who was governor of Andhra Pradesh for 10 years, the latter half of which he also served as the first governor of Telangana after the state's creation. God, I really ought to follow Indian politics more. They're really out here just creating whole new states from existing ones. The states also have their own legislative assemblies, 6 of which are bicameral, meaning they have 2 different houses like the union government, while the rest are all unicameral. The lower house is the State Legislative Assembly, also called the Vidhan Sabha or the Sasana Sabha, and in states with unicameral legislatures it's the only house present, while those with bicameral legislatures also have an upper house called the State Legislative Council, also called the Vidhan Parishad or the Sasana Mandali. Unlike the states, however, the union territories are governed in part or in whole by the union government. These territories are, in north to south order, Ladakh, Jammu and Kashmir, Chandigarh, which is actually the shared capital of Punjab and Haryana, which I guess makes memorizing all the state capitals slightly easier, the National Capital Territory, Dadra, Nagar Haveli, and Daman and Diu, which probably could have used a comma or two in that name, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, Puducherry, and Lakshadweep. While these territories are governed from Delhi, however, that doesn't mean the locals get no say whatsoever in their local affairs. Delhi and Puducherry elect their own governments, while others, like Ladakh, are divided into districts, with their own autonomous district councils. And, well, hope that suffices as a concise introduction as to how Indian governments work. Indian governments? There's only one of them. Hope that suffices as a concise introduction as to how the Indian government works, as explained by an extremely non-India, non-expert. Put it this way, I make these videos not just so you can learn how the world works, but so I can also learn more about how the world works. So if I missed anything or got something painfully wrong, do let me know in the comments.